Hey, Jeff, how you doing?
How are you guys?
How are you doing? I haven't talked to you in 100 years.
It's been 100 years.
Well, about 98.
It's flying.
You've been doing okay, yeah?
Yeah.
Busy?
Busy. It's crazy busy.
Oh, really? I wish you could use an assistant, but you can't because I don't know anything.
I hired one and I just let go today, and I spent pretty much most of the day with Mark. We went to Reno, dropped his sister off, picked up his car, got it registered, dealt with that. So he's now driving a 350Z.
Wait a minute, who's that? Your son?
My son.
Oh,
But then
right.
now he's stuck on Donna Stomach because I think he didn't properly turn it off, so it killed the battery. So I might have to leave early, but we need to just,
We're going to get through the voting things quickly.
It's a can of worms when your kid starts driving. It doesn't necessarily make things easier.
He's stuck up here? Well, he's going to try and get a jump. Oh, if he doesn't get
I'm going to call this to order since we have a kid to rescue on Donner Summit. Testing, testing. Ooh,
I've done 11 these
it works.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
We'll let.
I bought it when I was 3 years old, and I didn't realize it was 3 years old.
I'm just about to bang my hammer, Brian.
And I bought it.
There we go. Exactly. Everybody, attention, please. Good evening. We good?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I am now going to call to order this regular board meeting of the Truckee Donner Public Utility District. It is 6:04 p.m. on Wednesday, February 16th. There, now we're gavelled in. Shauna, could I get a roll call, please?
Thank you. Director Aguirre?
here.
Vice President Bender?
Here.
President Finn?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pledge of Allegiance. Director Bender, would you like to lead us?
Jeff,
Why not?
did you say Jeff?
I did say Jeff.
Oh, good.
All right. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And Brian, do we have any changes to the agenda this evening?
We have no changes this evening.
Thank you very much. Public comment. So this is time that is set aside for the public to address the board on any matter that is not on the agenda. So any agendized matter should be addressed at the time that we consider that item. Do we have any public comment this evening that was online?
No, Madam President.
I don't see any in front of me. Perfect. Directors update. This is a moment for the directors to comment on anything within the purview of the district. Do we have any directors' comments this evening?
None.
Only that we had a nice little storm, but that was kind of
No.
small.
It was very little, but
We could go with
we'll
that
take it.
Something.
Thank you. And I also do not have comments because I'm expecting to get most of my comments made during the presentations. General Manager's update. Brian, what do you have for us this week?
I have a few updates. Won't take too much time, so we can leave time for the workshop. I did want to mention that there have been some changes in the kind of the world around COVID and our personnel protocol here at the district. The recent lifting or retraction of the mask mandate, as it was outlined in the past, has been modified. Staff on premise that have been vaccinated and have a test to that vaccination have the option to wear a mask or not wear a mask. Staff that has not been vaccinated or has not attested to being vaccinated must wear a mask at all times unless they're working in their own workspace and have social distancing. Likewise, public coming into the building must wear masks if they're not vaccinated. The staff's approach here is to be consistent with the state and county guidelines, and then open it to the board for their discretion on how they would like to proceed with their comfort level here in the board chamber. So we do plan to hold closed session out of the closed session office so that we have the opportunity to continue social distancing for those who wish to wear a mask or not wear a mask. But look for board guidance on that. And we'll keep everyone abreast of any new changes. This has definitely been one of those situations where you start to act on a new protocol or new guideline, and then things change shortly thereafter. We're also trying to keep tabs on what other local public agencies are doing. We did get notice that I believe the town reopened some of their lobbies also. So our HR department and our PIO try to keep tabs on what the community is doing at large as well. We did also communicate to staff that the actual safety protocols of if you feel symptomatic or if you've had exposures, it's important that the personal responsibility there. We think that is probably the most effective measures for an agency of our size and our staffing counts, is that we continue to look out for each other. And if we think we've been exposed or have symptoms, that we do the responsible thing there. So we're encouraging that behavior currently and beyond COVID. Couple other updates. I'm happy to report that we did conduct an employee survey and got a great turnout in participation and a lot of great information. The staff plans to bring this to the board at the March 2nd meeting to give some data and discussion. I want to thank all staff at all levels for, I think we had an 81 or 82% participation, which is a very good number. We have, approximately 70 employees at the moment, and we got some great information, and we're looking forward to presenting that to the board and the community. And it also sets some great opportunities for us to continue to develop and improve in some areas as well. A couple of items that have been before the board in the past, the building modernization project. I just wanted to touch base that this is still moving along. We met with our architect. We're currently in the review phase with the town of Truckee. Our staff is going to meet with the town here, I think at the end of the week, and try to get things finalized. Our hope is that we can get this out to bid here in the next month or so and have a viable project for the summer and bring some efficiencies and modernization to the building frontage, and quite frankly, bring an updated look and beautification to our corridor here. We also are continuing to work on a facilities master plan. This is the project where the district is considering or evaluating opportunities to expand some infrastructure over into the courtyard or pool yard over off Pioneer Trail or Trail End over there, kind of between our Red Rock Quarry and below the 6170 tank there, we have some property that's really positioned well for additional facilities. We'll bring that to the board for review, consideration, and feedback once our architects have kind of a fully developed 90% or 80% plan that the board can look at and give feedback on. The big picture is it'll be a phased plan with the first phase is addressing some immediate needs, and then the board consideration for long-term phasing over time. We are an evolving utility on both water and power sides, and there's evolving needs, so we're trying to keep up with those. And then finally, I wanted to report out this morning, myself and staff attended the Truckee Tahoe Workforce Housing Agency meeting. Wanted to report out, we have continued positive discussions on opportunities and plans for addressing some of the workforce housing challenges that we have here in our community. The agency that we're a part of is specifically to local public agency workforce housing. Some great ideas related around down payment assistance, long-term rental programs, and master leasing are pretty positive and have a lot of potential. And so we will bring something to the board here in the coming months for consideration on those items as well. And that's all I have.
I think that's plenty. Thank you. So a lot of information. I'm interested to hear how the public housing continues to evolve, that JD. Okay, that brings us to item number 8. We have a presentation from the California Municipal Utilities Association, which I'm excited to hear. I did attend the Capitol Days last Monday, I believe it was. So yeah, now I'll get a chance to share it with you guys. I'm not giving the presentation.
presentation. This bill did not move forward. It is dead now. Assemblymember Friedman has expressed interest in this issue, but we recently have learned that Senator Hertzberg is likely going to be carrying the legislation this year, and so we'll be working with his office to address CMUA and other water agencies' concerns. And then just a summary, there was $5.2 billion over 3 years for response to drought and investments in a more resilient water future. The money's starting to get out the door now. The state board and other agencies are trying to get money to utilities and other eligible parties as quickly as possible. And then top energy bills, I'm going to turn it over to Patrick.
Thanks, Danielle. I guess we can save questions and comments for the end. Is that what we want to do, Danielle?
Yeah, I think so.
Great. So, really active year, as is every year in the California legislature, being a full-time body on energy as well. About 140 bills on energy we saw last year. One of them was sponsored by CMUA, AB 758. This may be of interest to Truckee Donner. What it does is it allows publicly owned electric utilities to issue what are called rate reduction bonds from now until 2036. These are a little bit different than your traditional revenue bond because they rely on a direct line item on a bill, and so there's a direct payment back to the bond issuer rather than collecting the needed revenue through your rates. And that is good because it results in a lower interest rate, and therefore you can save your customers money. So really this is a financial mechanism intended to help primarily with larger projects because there are more upfront costs with these bonds, but we think it's a useful tool to have in the tool belt for POUs as they transition to clean energy and undertake wildfire mitigation efforts and other infrastructure upgrades as well. So if Truckee Donner would like to learn more about that, we'd be happy to provide a more detailed briefing. And then moving on, clean energy was a big topic last year. SB 67 was one of the hotter bills. It did not pass. It would have transitioned California kind of away from its current 100% clean energy paradigm towards a 24/7 clean energy paradigm. That bill did not move, but we've had continual discussions with the author, Senator Josh Becker from the Silicon Valley area, and we expect him to introduce another bill, probably not as robust as it was last year, but we do expect him to continue his theme of hourly emissions accounting and hourly clean energy, not just clean energy on an annual basis. And then obviously really important to every utility, but probably more so for Truckee, given your location in the Sierra Nevadas, is the continued focus in the legislature on utility wildfire and resiliency issues. A lot of bills were introduced last year, not a lot passed. And primarily the bills were focused on the electrical corporations with IOUs like PG&E for obvious reasons. But this is an area where we expect there to be really continued focus in the legislature, as well as in the regulatory agencies as well. And I know Stephen was just on our bi-weekly wildfire call today talking about issues in front of the Wildfire Safety Advisory Board. So really actively engaged on wildfire issues. And I think there's one more. No, that's it.
You want to go back?
No, I was just going to mention transportation electrification. That'll continue to be a hot topic. The governor has said, hey, let's get rid of gas car sales after 2035. And so the legislature will continue to pursue legislation on transportation electrification, robust funding packages. And I think there's probably unique considerations for Truckee Donner, given that you serve a mountainous community. So EVs may be less practical in certain situations. So that'll continue to be a hot topic as well. We can move on from that, Danielle.
Thanks, Patrick. And just briefly, there were also what we consider water energy nexus bills, which are bills that affect both our electric and water members. And also, of course, dual utilities like Truckee Donner. Some of the top areas that you can see on the screen, I think probably Brown Act changes was the hottest topic when it came to these types of bills in 2021. lots of questions, especially with COVID, the kind of meeting that you all are having now with remote access. There was a lot of activity, and we expect that there will continue to be activity in this area. And then also on the fleet side, I don't know if Patrick, you want to talk at all about the bill that passed SB 372?
Yeah, and I expect Frank to get into some of the details on the regulatory side with fleet issues. ARB is very active on it. On the legislative side, the legislature is also interested in fleet decarbonization as well. We actually supported a bill on this last year, SB 372, and it was signed into law. What it would do is it would require the ARB to set up a program to offer some sort of financial and non-financial support. So that could be like loan guarantees or performance guarantees for medium, heavy duty, and off-road vehicles. And so we kind of started to see the writing on the wall that the state is really going to start robustly moving towards a decarbonized transportation system. And so we've been looking for opportunities to support potentially helpful laws and policies that ultimately could help our member agencies if and when they transition to more zero emission vehicles in their fleets, and SB 372 fit into that category.
Thanks. There you go. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the 2022-2023 governor's budget proposal, so you all know what's been proposed by the governor, not the legislature yet. We're not sure where they're going to land. But it was a $280 billion budget proposal focused on the 5 pillars on your screen. I would say there's kind of a lump of energy and water issues into this combating climate change kind of area, but there's also some funding that's outside that as well that affects Truckee Donner and other utility members. There's expected to be a 45 or anticipated to be a $45 billion surplus. Of course, it'll depend on receipt and other tax revenue that comes in over the next few months. It is expected to hit the reserve cap of the 10% of budget. And also there are implications related to the GAN limit, and we could spend probably an entire hour going through the intricacies of the GAN limit, but basically it just limits the amount of money that a legislature can spend, except for that expenditures on infrastructure are one of the things that are not counted towards the limit. So we definitely are trying to push the legislature in the direction of spending a good portion of the surplus on infrastructure. On the water side, there is, it's the second year, the $5.2 billion in infrastructure, drought, and other funding. An additional $750 million is been proposed by the governor for this next year, focused on water use efficiency and drought. $22.5 billion in climate investments, and I think this is the section where energy is housed, right, Patrick?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, so if you want to talk about the funding that's encapsulated within these climate investments.
Yeah, the governor has proposed $2 billion in clean energy funding. That's broken down in several categories, including funding for long duration energy storage, green hydrogen, and then building decarbonization. He's also proposing to fund a very small pilot program to subsidize the cost of transporting wood to biomass facilities, and that's something that we're supporting. And there's also a $6.1 billion package as part of that for zero emission vehicles, and some of that, about half of that, is for zero emission vehicle infrastructure, primarily EV chargers installation, both in DC fast chargers and also level 2 chargers that are publicly available as well.
Great, thank you. And then just, we have, we're going to be submitting our budget letter in the next couple of days, but we have several recommendations to include more funding for a number of categories where our legislative committee decided to support the clean energy proposal and the water funding, but we also have additional asks that we feel will be important to invest in. On the customer arrearages side, I know the electric utility arrearage funding was not enough, and so we're looking at that, and then also extending the eligibility for water-related arrearages to the end of the year. Some of the other topics are on the screen of areas we feel they could increase funding, and so we'll be working with the legislature in the Senate and Assembly to try and integrate some of our priorities into the final budget proposal.
And Danielle, just one
Yeah.
quick comment
Yeah.
for the board, just kind of an interesting thing on the budget is, I think we're observing that a lot more policy work is getting done through the state budget than is typical. So last year, there were 55 budget trailer bills. Those are the policy bills that implement the budget. That's 3 times the normal amount of budget trailer bills. And I personally expect this year's budget cycle to be just as robust. There's a variety of factors of why that is, but just something that's interesting from an advocate's perspective is a lot of the policy decisions are now getting made in the budget, even more so than they were before.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Patrick. And unfortunately, the budget process does not have as much public involvement or even involvement from advocates in terms of how these bills get shaped. So it creates a more challenging atmosphere, I think, for everyone when they have big policies that are going through the budget trailer bill process. So this is time for us to pull out our crystal ball and tell you what we think is going to be alive and moving forward in the legislature for this upcoming year. I will say by the end of this week, we're going to know for sure because that's the introduction deadline for bills. But on the water side, I think accessing more water project funding is going to be important and out there as a lot of legislators have various projects they want to see funded. Affordability is going to be out there as well. This is, I think, on electric and water, but it definitely has been a topic of conversation on the water side. We're really, I think you all are hoping for a miracle March. We're hoping for a miracle March, but we anticipate that we'll still be addressing drought issues. And then also water quality is a perennial issue for the legislature. And so there are always bills that are introduced that try to get at this issue of improving the state's water quality. And Patrick, do you want to cover the energy issues?
Yeah, just real quick, and I would just say I was talking to Danielle earlier today, and the bill introduction deadline is Friday, and I think so far they've introduced 700 bills in the legislature. Well, last year they introduced 2,600, so that means they're probably going to introduce another 1,900 bills in the next 2 days, which is just kind of an astounding amount. On energy, there'll be a lot of priorities: clean energy, obviously, utility wildfire issues. I think the one thing I'd really highlight for the board, and this is something we got a chance to hear about at our Capitol Day last week, is what I'm calling the Glasgow or the COP26 effect. That is a group of, or a delegation of about 15 legislators and members from the governor's administration went to the COP26 climate conference in Glasgow this fall. And they met with international counterparts and talked about climate change and shared ideas. And that's going to fuel legislation. They're going to come back, members of the delegation are going to come back with ideas that they got from their counterparts from around the world, and they're going to try and legislate on those issues. So I expect a pretty robust year on climate change generally, as is always the case in California, and electric issues too. And I think that'll be kind of compounded or really influenced by the attendance of a number of these members at the COP26 climate conference.
Thanks, Patrick. And just as a follow-up to that, the Senate has actually created a climate working group, and both Patrick and I sat in on a local government representative meeting, and we're talking about the issues that are important to us. But it was interesting because a lot of the senators that were in Glasgow were also part of this work group. So they've got some big ideas for what they want to move forward with. Water Energy Nexus, again, changes to the Brown Act to try and get up to these new technologies that we all have accessible now. Climate resilience, clean fleets. This is an issue that I know is very important to Truckee Donner, how to transition to zero emission if you can. And then also employment issues. And just a couple of additional things to note. The legislature is now in what's being called the swing space. It's a building on O Street. So all of the entire Capitol Annex is going to be taken to the ground and rebuilt. So there's still the old side of the Capitol, but then all the people that were in what we call the new side, which I think was actually from the 50s, are now in this new space on O Street. So if you come to make in-person visits to your legislators, it will be in a different location. And just continuing to legislate amidst COVID, we're still testifying remotely. Hopefully that will be turning the corner soon. I know Brian talked a little bit about kind of changing masking rules. So we're hoping that things kind of glide into a bit of more normalcy. And then I think that the number is now up to 30. Is that right, Patrick? Of legislators who are not going to be running for re-election or who have left for 35. Okay.
Yeah.
That are changing districts, or there's going to be a huge amount of turnover at the end of 2022. And there actually have already started to be several resignations midterm. So this is creating a lot of uncertainty, and it actually makes it difficult depending on the amount of votes that a legislator needs, especially in the assembly, to get a bill out. It's proving to be more difficult because I think there's like 4 vacancies on the assembly side right now, and that can make a difference depending on the bill you're trying to move forward. So now I'm going to turn over to Andrea and Frank to talk about the regulatory issues, and we'll start with water.
Thanks, Danielle. So the first item here I want to hit on water use efficiency. There's several things going on with the Water Board, Department of Water Resources. Stephen's been very active, and I appreciate his involvement. Brian as well, and we generally appreciate Truckee Donner's involvement on all things water loss and with the efforts with the indoor and outdoor standards on the water resources. So quickly, the indoor water use standard, there was a final report, and y'all kind of mentioned earlier, that was drafted and finalized by DWR and the Water Board. That was sent over to the legislature, recommends lowering the standards that are currently in statute. We are now waiting to see what the legislature is going to do and implementing any future law and reducing what the indoor water use efficiency standard will be. So that's all that I have on that item. On the outdoor water use standard, DWR is still drafting and finalizing its recommendations to send to the Water Board. Once those recommendations are finalized, the Water Board will then begin rulemaking. It's still anticipated sometime in this year, but that DWR has been a little bit delayed in finalizing its report. Actually, they had a recent workshop at the end of January to propose updated CII recommendations, and the coalition that consists of us and Aqua and CWA, we submitted comments earlier this week proposing an alternative to what DWR had proposed. And I can go into any of these specifics if you all want me to, but a bunch of numbers. So we've commented on that, and we're waiting for the DWR to finalize their report, hoping that they take our coalition's comments and concerns into consideration in the final report. The last bit on that puzzle is the water loss rulemaking. The public comment period has ended last Friday. We submitted comments with, again, a larger coalition consisting of Aqua, CWA, and California, Nevada section of AWWA. And those comments, Stephen had incorporated some of them into the letter submitted by Truckee Donner. So sure that they're reflective of your agency's perspective, and we're happy to have the support with the Water Board as well, because they incorporated a proposal for an alternative compliance plan in some fashion or another. It could always be better, but they took our recommendation to heart, which I appreciate. On that, we're waiting for the staff to review comments that have been received. I imagine there were tons of comments that were submitted, and we all anticipate there's going to be an additional comment period that opens, a 15-day comment period, which we will have the opportunity to comment only on the changes made to the draft regulations. Water Board anticipates finalizing those regulations sometime in this year, and the compliance date starts with the questionnaires in the next couple of years, and the first compliance period is 2028. So it's quick. I know the Water Board is moving fast because they're a couple of years behind on that regulation. The other items here, water quality and voluntary agreements, just to note that while Water Board is pursuing all things water use efficiency, they still have plans to initiate and finalize some MCLs this year, hexchrome and microplastics. Microplastics, we actually expected to come before the board sometime this month, but it might be next month. So we'll see when they adopt a guidebook guidelines that they put out the end of last year. And the board is transitioning away from voluntary agreements to finish the Bay Delta water quality control plan. They presented a couple of options for implementation, regulation being one of them that we've heard is their preferred method. Voluntary agreements are not completely off the table. They're encouraging agencies to work with the water board, but we're following what's going on and trying to advocate on behalf of our agencies that are interested in that topic. One other item that's not on this list that I wanted to include is the general order that's being drafted by the water board on related to wildfire mitigation plans. It's supposed to be a general permitting scheme to cover all activities related to wildfire mitigation plans and then some, the scope of which they're still developing. I mentioned this because it came up at least with the wildfire group at that CMUA, and we are meeting with water board staff actually tomorrow to talk about more details and to get more information from them. So ongoing, they do plan on finalizing that order sometime this year. Not sure if they're going to stick to that schedule, but we're involved in that effort as well. That's all I have.
Great. Thanks, Andrea. And before I go to Frank, I just wanted to mention, Andrea talked about hexchromium and microplastics, and it's true they're working on an MCL for hexchrome, but not to scare anyone, but they're not working on an MCL for microplastics yet. They're fulfilling the obligations of a bill that was passed by Senator Portantino, or was authored by Senator Portantino a couple years ago, and thankfully right now they're just looking at monitoring and potentially a notification level, but we assume someday there will be an MCL for microplastics. So it's pretty much ubiquitous throughout the state, so that may be something that impacts Truckee Donner. And then moving on to Water Energy Nexus, I don't know if you wanted to talk about anything in the energy section, but I know advanced clean fleets is something of great importance and interest to Truckee Donner.
Yeah, thank you very much, Danielle. And hello, everybody. I wanted to talk about one item under energy. The Wildfire Safety Advisory Board and CMUA is planning for an unanticipated risk workshop. This is the result of a request by a member of the Wildfire Safety Advisory Board for us to evaluate and consider black swan events. It was not a completely accurate way of depicting it, but essentially unanticipated risks. This Wildfire Safety Advisory Board member essentially wants us to start to think about things that aren't normally associated with wildfires. Generally, as Stephen and some of the others note, the Wildfire Safety Advisory Board can be accurately accused of scope creep. But on this particular item, we feel this could actually be a very good, productive, and instructional workshop. And the reason I mention it here is that I think it is something, at one point we're going to, during the workshop, we're still building out the agenda, but we're going to ask for some of our members to participate. And I think Truckee Donner would have a great deal to say about this, given your service territory and your experiences in this area. I'll be following up with you on that. And then let's go ahead and move on to Advanced Clean Fleets. Advanced Clean Fleets is a proposal. This is a pre-rulemaking stage. It's a proposal by the Air Resources Board to mandate that for public fleets, beginning in 2024, 50% of your medium and heavy-duty vehicle purchases, this is 8,500 pounds or greater of gross vehicle weight rating, 50% beginning in 2024 would have to be zero emission, and 100% in 2027. We've been working with CARB quite a bit on this. We've been meeting with CARB board members. I met with Richard Corey, the executive officer. We have some key concerns. In addition to simply the cost and budgetary impact, we're concerned that these vehicles may not be able to provide the services that we need. As you all know, the vehicles that you use to maintain your system, both electric and water systems are very specialized, and we're concerned that CARB isn't fully considering the energy needs that these vehicles need. And so we've asked for CARB to implement an independent technical advisory panel that would evaluate the state of play with zero emission vehicles and how they can be used. So far, the board members seem to be very positive about that idea, and so far CARB staff seems to be very negative about it. That's kind of predictable. The other concern, and this is an overwhelming concern, I believe, is that of emergency response. Currently, the proposal that CARB has made allows for a request for a 25% exemption for emergency response. We don't believe that that's appropriate. I think for some of our members that would be perfectly fine, but for many of them that would not be appropriate at all, be far too small, both in terms of the unique nature of the service territory, such as what Truckee Donner sees, also for smaller fleets where you just really aren't able to do the job with emergency response with just 25% of your fleet. Now, there's currently in the proposed rule, there's no opt-out, there's no exemption request other than this emergency response exemption I talked about. We do anticipate that there will be another version of the proposal released. We're not sure when, but we have been told by CARB staff that there would be another version of their proposal released, a pre-rulemaking version. Again, this is really critical because, candidly, we don't typically see much change in these regulations once the 45-day official rulemaking is issued. So we try to get as much work done before that. So we're hoping that we can have some more flexibility. Essentially what we want is for our governing boards, such as you all, to have the authority to demonstrate the need for an exemption based on the unique nature of your utility. And there's just so much diversity among the publicly owned electric utilities as well as the public water and wastewater agencies that an arbitrary one-size-fits-all rule won't work. What's interesting is I just learned today, by the way, of a bill that we're not really tracking because it doesn't really apply to us directly. That's Senate Bill 1010. And I have no idea what the status is, whether this thing is going to fly at all. But it is essentially a mandatory zero-emission vehicle purchase requirement for state heavy-duty trucks, 19,000 pounds or more. And the reason that it's interesting is the current version of this proposal does allow the state to make a determination in a public hearing that it cannot do the job it needs to do and meet the zero-emission vehicle procurement requirement. Now, currently, the public rule that we have does not afford us that option. But it is interesting that this bill has been developed that would afford the state that option. And so we'll see how that goes. As I said, it doesn't really affect us directly, but I think indirectly it really sets up a nice standard. We anticipate that the Advanced Clean Fleets rule will be presented in a proposed state to the CARB board at I'm not sure if it's the next board meeting or not. I apologize. I think it might be. But that won't be for a vote. That's just to put it in front of the board and get the responses from the board members. We anticipate that the actual 45-day rule will come out later. Staff intends to have it presented to the board for a vote later this year. That's all I have on that, so I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, Frank. Appreciate that. And with that, that's it. That's what we have for you tonight. This is all of our contact information. We pride ourselves on being responsive and engaged with all of you. So I think Stephen and Brian, have taken us up on that offer, and we appreciate it every time they call. So Thank you again, President Finn and members of the board, for the opportunity to present to you today, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, Danielle and Patrick and Andrea and Frank for your time and your information. We certainly get a lot of quantity out of the legislature. It is hard to parse. So we're really grateful to have your efforts on our behalf.
The video froze, or the audio froze, sorry.
Oh, rats. Well, we'll just have to stick with thank you.
Thank you so much, yeah, and please, feel free to follow up.
We do have a few questions. I see
great.
Director Gross and Brian.
Go ahead, Steve. You've been promoted to director.
Been promoted, I'm sorry, Council Gross. Whatever. True. You work for free as a director.
Anyway, good evening, Danielle and team. This is Steve Gross. I'm General Counsel for the district. Thanks for that presentation. It's really helpful information. I've got a couple questions with respect to statewide ballot initiative number 21, the Taxpayer Protection and Government Accountability Act. And my questions are whether or not you have any updated information about that, and whether CMUA has an action plan. And just for anybody who isn't aware of this, this is a statewide ballot initiative. It hasn't qualified yet for the ballot, but they're trying to get it qualified for the November ballot. And it would try to limit local government revenue raising by amending provisions of the Constitution, including Props 13 to 18, which should raise a big flag, and Prop 26, and essentially limit our ability to raise fees, assessments, et cetera, to the minimum amount necessary to accomplish the purpose for which we've imposed the fee or the tax or the assessment. And so this could really hamper our ability and other local agencies' abilities to raise necessary funds, and it could be retroactive back to the beginning of January of this year. So anyway, that's a long-winded question, but I'm just curious as to whether or not you have any information, current information, and whether or not CMUA has or is developing an action plan to combat this.
Well, we don't have any more information than what you shared, so appreciate you giving that very great summary and concise summary on what the ballot initiative's potential implications are. Yes, that obviously that type of approach could be very concerning. Typically, from CMUA standpoint, we have gotten engaged on ballot initiatives, but it's been when they qualify for the ballot. We typically haven't taken action prior to that, but we are closely following the ones that are out there. You know, there was one on water infrastructure and the proponents pulled that back because they weren't able to get enough signatures. So we'll see if that ballot initiative gets enough signatures, but we are taking a look at it, and we'll continue to keep everyone apprised if it does in fact qualify for the ballot.
Thank you very much.
Brian, did you have a question or comment?
I didn't have a question. I just wanted to, at the end here, I can't speak highly enough regarding Danielle, Andrea, Patrick, and Frank's work with the district here. Also Barry, their executive director. What an amazing team. The tremendous value in being a part of CMUA. They give an organization of our size a voice regardless of the issue. There's never been an issue with accessibility with the team there. And so I want to thank them. We look forward to continued success and working with that group, and just express our appreciation for your work for us.
Thank you. We really appreciate it. And right back at you. We love having engaged members. And so we welcome any time that you have comments or questions, and appreciate your responses whenever we ask for feedback from the district.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much again for your time and for your efforts on our behalf. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
So many things to worry about. Great. I'll put that aside. and keep moving forward. Consent calendar is next on our list. Do we have any public comment on the consent calendar this evening?
No, Madam President.
Thank you. Do we have any comments or questions from the board about things on the consent calendar?
No.
Okay, I am also great with that. Do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar as it stands?
So moved.
Second.
Excellent. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Director Aguirre?
Yes.
Vice President Bender?
Yes.
President Finn?
Yes.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you all very much. Which brings us to the meat of tonight's meeting, our workshop, in which Stephen is going to provide us with an update on the district's electric resource portfolio and opportunities to plan for and invest in local, clean, resilient, and fiscally responsible projects and programs. So we shall receive some information now. Thank you.
Good evening, President Finn, members of the board. That is the presentation there. And you should have a printed version of it, but you can follow along on the screen as well. So this evening's presentation or workshop on local, clean, resilient, and fiscally responsible green rates and beyond. And really where this workshop stems from, the board in our last public meeting regarding green energy rates asked or requested from staff a workshop to really further discuss and further understand, the world we're dealing with, where the district is currently, and what our challenges are. And so, historically, we've brought to the board, to the community, I believe twice, green energy rate proposals, and some of the feedback and concerns were that there was still some work to do in terms of structure, actually, defining what those rates would produce or what they would be attributed to. And so we heard a common thread that moving the needle was something this district, the board, this community wanted these rates or funds to be able to do. And that was a common discussion in the last meeting as well. So staff sat down and posed the question, if we're going to move the needle, what needle are we moving? And that was really the fundamental question that this presentation and this workshop is looking to discuss and address. There are a lot of different green energy rates or fund structures that we could explore. There are a lot of different programs out there to further renewable portfolios or local resiliency. And so we really want to see what needle are we moving and what challenges are we faced with. So strap on your seatbelts and get ready for a great discussion. Mr. Poncelet.
Thank you. Thank you, General Manager Wright. Am I on? Okay. Thank you, General Manager Wright. Appreciate that. This is going to be a tag team effort, and myself and Mr. Keats will be giving the rest of the presentation. We're going to talk about three main areas. The first one we're calling reviewing our operating envelope, and that L&R presentation's a big part of it, and then it's the industry we're in and the community we live in. Pieces of the puzzle, our mission, our vision, our current portfolio, our current mandates, what we're doing, and then bringing it all together in what is that needle. What's the definition of success? How do you measure it? What are the metrics? And then what programs, projects, or funding streams could be directed towards those goals? So I'm going to start with the first part. And, I think it's great for me that we had this background presentation from CMUA in that they really talked about the kind of universe we're going to focus on energy here and energy bills that really impact us. So AB 32 cap and trade is driving our regulatory framework. It's driving some of our revenue through the cap and trade auctions, but it's also driving our GHG targets and mandates. SB 100, we've talked a lot in our community, 60% renewable by 2030. And as you'll see later and know, we're already there, 100% carbon free by 2045. And that distinction between those two is important in this discussion. SB 901 is what's driving the wildfire mitigation plans. There have been other bills, there will be more, but we're spending a lot more money, and we have a lot of mandates and requirements to respond to wildfire, and that spills over to the water side too, and having to harden our systems. And then historically, SB 1037 and AB 2021 was the public benefits good charge mandate that we've been collecting for 15 years now, and that's what funded our historic energy efficiency and conservation programs. And of course, the whole world's transitioning to electrification. So it's a dynamic environment that seems to be accelerating. You've heard CMUA. What's the next GHG target? It's coming in the scope and plan update through CARB, and potential legislation or executive orders will drive that, and that's the new GHG targets. Frank talked about the Advanced Clean Fleets rule. That's major for us. As it exists today, we'd have to buy 1.5 or 2 times our fleet size just to do the work we're doing today, even, if we could even do that with the zero emission technology. And so while we're supportive of CARB's goals to decarbonize transportation, we feel it's got to be done in a responsible way. Electrification overall, transportations and buildings, big topic. The water energy nexus, there's a reason CMUA breaks it out, because the two are intricately tied, and we always look at that. So are there going to be new procurement mandates? Probably. Will they impact to us? We don't know. The mandate to subsidize transportation of biomass, for example, is in itself a procurement mandate of sorts. And so we're always interested in that, and we'd prefer to let this board and our local needs drive our procurement, not a one-size-fits-all from the state. And then certainly more unfunded mandates. They come every year. You heard it, over 2,000 bills that they have to weed through and figure out, yes, no, definitely yes, definitely no, and that kind of stuff. So it's also a dynamic environment with diverse and powerful interests. So you have energy and water industry special interests, and they can be very powerful, from the energy industry, the auto industry, across the board. Political interests at the federal, state, and local interests, and we're always nervous when politics intersects with good utility operations. Environmental interests, very strong and very eager to address what I think we all see as big changes in our environment. Social justice, equity, and affordability interests have always been there, but they're stepping up strong too, because of some of the negative externalities that have kind of flowed to those communities. Workforce and housing and recruitment and retention, the silver tsunami, everything about succession planning, and then community and economic development interests always remain important in terms of vibrant, sustainable communities. So we're also seeing, a lot of changes in the industry. Significant cost pressures. There's opportunities, almost the requirement, to invest in new technologies just to keep up and, do everything that needs to be done that's getting bigger and bigger with, the same or only slightly more resources. Load growth, particularly with electrification, is going to be a major factor over the next years and decades. Rate externalities, I call it socializing climate change or societal problems through rates. And while it's easy to say, well, just have the utility do it and, they can collect the rate from the people, electric rates and affordability for social justice and equity issues are incredibly important, but they're also super important in the state's climate change policy, which is drive us to 100% and then fuel switch everything to electricity, and price is the #1 signal for market transformation, which they're relying on, and if it's too expensive, people won't switch. Grid reliability, and we've lived that, and some of it is natural disasters, catastrophic, natural events, and some of it, to be honest, is catastrophic state policy, like PSPS and shutting off the grid for wildfire. What becomes of PG&E is huge, just in that it impacts our model, because we're a competing model to them. And so they're 13 million customers. They're over half the state. And so whatever happens to them does impact us. And so we're tracking that, and local control. And you heard CMUA say it, they work every day to make sure the local governing boards have the authority to make appropriate decisions for their local community. And that's always fundamental in everything we do. So we also have evolving customer needs and expectations, and we've lived that too. Higher levels of service, higher levels of reliability, increased, if not instant, communications. They want support with electrification, increased customer grid integration. They want community GHG leadership. They want stable and competitive rates. They want their trusted utility advisor to help them, and they want transparency. And so part of this discussion is, what are the trade-offs? We want to do it all, and we're pretty good at all of it, but, we have to pick and choose where we make our incremental or major strategic improvements. So how do we go about doing that? Because we've been engaged, the board's been engaged, staff's been engaged, and it really comes back to that strategic plan and community engagement and the very impressive and extensive effort that we completed last year. So painting the landscape and board goals came out of that. And I won't read them, but, the financial stability, the environmental stewardship, engaging with the customers, these drive and, inform how we do our work. The 4 board initiatives came out of that: the undergrounding of overhead, the community broadband, local clean generation, and 100% renewable. And again, that's a big kind of input into the discussion tonight. There was extensive community input, and we all remember and appreciate that, and always thank our community for engaging with us. The plan is an operations and capital roadmap that's very detailed, and it drives budget and organizational structure. At the end of the day, your budget, how you spend your money and the people you have and where you put them is your strategy. And so we always want to tie those together, and it's a guiding document for board staff and our community. So what have we done since we passed the plan? We passed an aggressive and impressive fiscal year 22 and 23 budget that's executing what's in the plan. We launched the board broadband committee, and we're very excited for their recommendation at the next March 2nd board meeting. We put together a green rate proposal that was presented. We're investigating local, clean, resilient, and fiscally responsible resources, kind of our new 3-legged stool of sorts. And that's a big part of tonight's presentation. We're investigating additional funding sources because these are big initiatives. We're investing in improved communications, doing what we can instantly, like doing the on-call outage communications that Brian put in place, investing in Nixle and putting that. We have almost 1,000 people opt into Nixle already. So that's been good. And then investing in the NISC OMS system is really the technology part and the tool that we're very excited about. And then we're seeking to leverage resources and maximize benefits to all customers. What needle and, what are we moving and how do we make sure everyone's benefiting from the work? So now we're going to get down to the pieces of the puzzle here, and I'm going to pass it to Mr. Keats. But, we've kind of laid the framework of this operating envelope in which we function as an electric utility. The green, and you're going to notice the change to fee or fund, is a great tool which can help the district achieve specific objectives, but what are those objectives? We need to bring clarity to what we seek to accomplish, and we feel that our strategic plan and mission statement should be used to kind of center our vision for the future as we go forward. So with that, I welcome Mr. Keats to the mic, and I guess we can take questions at the end. Okay. Mr. Keats.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Poncelet. So as Mr. Poncelet laid out, we felt it was important for us to kind of circle back to the mission and vision statements that were put together in the strategic plan that was adopted in 2021. As those should be what we use to guide our vision for the future, and use to help us assess or really just kind of figure out what needle are we trying to move, to stick with the metaphor, and how are we going to measure whether or not we've made any sort of progress in those efforts. So I'm going to actually read the mission statement real quick, because there's, I think, all of the words that they just kind of pop out, and I think it'd be useful. So our mission statement is to provide reliable, high-quality utility and customer services while managing district resources in a safe, open, responsible, and environmentally sound manner at the lowest practical cost. And there's a lot of elements in there, a lot of pieces, a lot of puzzle pieces, if you will. And without any one of those pieces, we would not be able to achieve our mission, right? We kind of consolidated those into three overarching areas, which are rates, resiliency, and sustainability, which kind of make this pyramid of sorts. And a pyramid needs all of its sides in order to stand. And so we need all of these sides in order for our mission to stand and for us to be successfully achieving that. And within the strategic plan, out of the mission and vision came the goals that Mr. Poncelet referred to, and within those goals were specific projects identified, all of which we have in our budget and we're making progress towards. And of those, a couple of projects in particular kind of percolated to the surface when it came to conversations around the green rate, green fund, whatever we want to call it, topic, which are local clean power generation and 100% renewable portfolio. Now, these aren't necessarily the only goals or objectives that we could be pushing. As Mr. Poncelet referred to earlier, we're operating within a very dynamic environment. And there are new greenhouse gas regulations that are going to be coming down the pipeline. So we might need to pivot at some point. But for purposes of this conversation and this presentation, this workshop, we kind of picked those two in particular as they were germane to the previous green rate discussions, and they're still very pertinent to our mission here in the community moving forward. So I'm told that this plot has a lot of history here at the district, and I believe that the kitchen told me that it is now a gluten and dairy-free lasagna with free-range vegetables. Yes, but it also happens to demonstrate our fuel mixture over time as a utility. And what I wanted to kind of point out in this slide is that I wanted to talk about the progress that we've made to date with respect to one of our goals, which is the 100% renewable portfolio. And it turns out, we're hovering between 60 and 65% renewable in our portfolio currently. So we've exceeded the legislation by 8+ years. And when Red Mesa comes online, later this year, we'll be closer to 70-75%. So we're making very, very good progress towards this goal, and I don't want it to be kind of forgotten or left out as we have these conversations about making improvements. And certainly we're not at 100% yet, but we've made it quite a ways. And I think it's also important to point out that usually it's the first 80% that is relatively easy to get to, but then that last 20%, that's where all of the sweat and the effort, the resources really comes into play. And that's a point that I think Mr. Horvath is going to be making in April when he talks about our power mix and what potential opportunities we have there. But I'm going to kind of scratch the surface a little bit to to kind of show some of the nuances and the difficulties that are coming our way. So some might call these kindergarten spaghetti artwork, but what they represent are the average hourly generation profiles that we got from certain sources from within our generation mix. So, one of those represents the Veo heat recovery plant. Another one represents the Horse Butte wind farm. And what you'll notice, so each one of those lines is actually 1 month of the year. And then, it shows the kind of hourly generation over the course of a day, an average day in that month. And you'll notice it's all over the place, and that's because they're intermittent sources. And one of the difficulties in putting together a portfolio mix is that we aren't looking at just the monthly, and we're not looking at just the annual energy generation or energy production. We have to look at it at the hourly or sub-hourly level. If in 1 minute of the day we are lacking a megawatt of power, we have to get that from somewhere, and that's why it's very important for us to make sure that as we're stacking all of these sources together, that we're also being very careful with with what those profiles look like, so that we can cover ourselves if one source might be lacking on a certain day compared to another day. And that's where base load type sources come into play, and they're very, very handy. A straight line is easy to predict, and it's very helpful when we're trying to supply consistent, reliable power to our customers. Go to the next slide. Oh, perfect. So, kind of recentering now, then back to the topic of green rate, or what are we trying to accomplish here with the 100% renewable portfolio goal. I think our goal here is to reduce our community's contributions to global warming. We're trying to demonstrate leadership in national and international efforts at decarbonization, and we're as we demonstrate, we're doing good progress. We're making good progress, and we can certainly do more in that area, and Joe's going to talk about several opportunities that we have in that arena. But as we get closer and closer to that 100% mark, it's going to become more and more difficult, more and more expensive, more and more effort is going to be required to really get there. Now, circling to the other goal, which was local clean power generation, I think the first thing that kind of came up in my head as far as questions was like, well, what's the difference between this and 100% renewable portfolio? And there's kind of two differences. One, we're talking about clean power. We're using a different word here: clean power versus renewable. And in a regulatory environment, that those two words have very different connotations and have very different meanings. And I think in our environment where we're at, we have a little bit more leeway there, and specifically when it comes to clean power, how are we going to define what clean power is? What is our definition there, so that we can make progress towards that? But I think and at least for the public, maybe one of the more key words here is local. And we've had several conversations surrounding this, and typically those conversations tend to trend away from the conversation about clean power and more towards the topic of resiliency. And so resiliency has become a very big issue within the community, a very big topic of interest for us as well as for the community. And so well, before I go to the next point, I wanted to actually kind of throw out a little hypothetical, kind of tease out the difference between these two, because there's certain tensions, I think, between these two goals that that we need to kind of wrestle with in order to figure out which one do we want to attack first, or how are we going to go about this. So throwing out the example of a solar plant located in Truckee versus located in UAMP, so Utah somewhere. If I was a developer, or representing the PUD, and I'm trying to decide where am I going to build this solar plant, well, it would kind of depend, right? If I'm looking to maximize my annual solar electricity production, or maximize my return on investment for my investors, or maximize my profits if I was a private enterprise, then I would certainly be looking to Utah to build my plant. More consistent and year-round sun, cheaper land costs, easier to expand to a larger scale. And with solar, in particular, scale is where you're going to be able to start dropping your cost per watt for the construction. So then that begs the question, okay, well, what is the advantage then to building it here in Truckee? And the advantage is if I pair it with storage, then I get some resiliency for Truckee in the case that we have a transmission outage. And so I think what this hypothetical kind of draws into focus is that the metrics that we use to define success are going to have a significant impact on the choice that we ultimately decide to make. So since we've been talking a little bit about resiliency, let's kind of dive a little bit deeper into that. And I think that before we really dive into it, the first thing that really needs to be talked about is definition. What do we mean by resiliency, and how does that differ from reliability? You go next slide. So we've been kind of working internally with a certain proposed definition here, but it certainly doesn't have to be the definition, and we'd like this to be maybe a part of the conversation tonight, is defining for ourselves collectively what do we mean by a resiliency as opposed to reliability. So the proposed definition here is how well can our community weather through disruptions to our power supply. Our main power supply, our plan A, when that goes away, what is our plan B, and how well does that plan B support our community until plan A can get back into action, right? So then what is a disruption? We can have many different types of disruptions. We can have system-wide disruptions like a PSOM type event or other type of transmission outage event that affects the entire system. We can have localized outages like Snowmageddon, or we can have stray birds or rodents or balloons come in and become a little too friendly with our substations. All of which are kind of different levels of outages and have different means by which we would need to respond to harden the systems or to have alternative plans of action. And then from a long-term perspective, we certainly aren't dealing with this now by any means, but we ought to be thinking about it for future-proofing our systems. What is the ultimate impact of electrification going to have on our grid here in Truckee? Transportation electrification, as you've heard from the previous presentation and Mr. Poncelet, is a very real thing. It's accelerating, and it's coming into town, and a lot of it's already here. So how is that going to impact your grid, and how are we going to prepare our grid to be able to handle those additional loads? And we have different ways of potentially measuring resiliency, or the resilience of our grid. We can look at, well, what's the percentage of customers impacted by any given event, or the average event, or over the course of the year? What's the percent of our total system capacity that we have covered by certain backup systems? What's the overall length of time that a circuit or a substation or our whole system as a whole can last in the event of a widespread transmission outage? So these are a lot of pieces of a puzzle. You asked us to bring a green rate proposal, and we gave you a jigsaw puzzle. And there are a lot of different ideas that the community has brought to us, and that we've talked about internally, and those are all kind of represented here on these puzzle pieces, and each one of these could be a needle for us to move, and these are by no means all of them, right? This is just kind of a small spattering because I only had so much space. And then outside of these puzzle pieces kind of floating in the ether are different potential metrics that we could use to measure the success of any one effort or the funds that we generate towards any one particular effort. And the job that we have in front of us right now is to piece these all together and attach these in a way that we can use to actually start making some decisions, ranking one decision over another and identifying how we want to move forward. And to do that, I kind of put together another little hypothetical, super high level rough numbers. So, if we wanted clearer numbers, we'd certainly need to do a feasibility study. But this gets us kind of started as maybe a thought experiment to get the conversation going. So what I did was I started with with the resiliency topic. I said, okay, given a PSOM type event, and what options do we have available to us right now to make our grid resilient? And I shot for the moon, and I said, okay, the entirety of Truckee, all of our substations, our entire load. And I also did not allow pesky logistics like land and whatnot to get in the way. Okay. So I said, let's be pessimistic here and say we get 2 events a year. So that's 2 7-day events ish a year, which represents about 168 hours per event. So that's about 336 hours a year. Got some numbers. So the battery storage numbers are kind of first pass cut from a study that HDR did for us this last year. And then the gas generator numbers are numbers that Mr. Ponsley helped pull together for us with some of his research. And I think probably the big number that is jumping out right now are the lifetime cost numbers. And I'd like to kind of caveat those a little bit because you'll see that battery storage has like a 10-year useful life expectancy before you need to get a different. And this is lithium ion. This isn't flow batteries, et cetera. There's other technologies. The natural gas generator is assumed to have a 30-year useful life. Temporary diesel generator, that's like if we rent a diesel generator from NV Energy to get through the event, right? Worst case scenario. And that we have as just a single year useful life just for the numbers. So those are all kind of apples and oranges up there. Where we start getting into the metrics that we might potentially start using to assess our objectives are down here in the lower box. So, first of all, per event backup hours, how many hours can these different sources provide to us in terms of backup? Battery storage, unfortunately, it's not very much. You get about 4 hours, or a lot of the battery storage systems that are being put into use right now are usually come in quantities of like 8-hour storage, backup storage, but the cost is also a little bit over double what's shown there for. So if we wanted an 8-hour battery backup system, the cost is actually pretty equivalent to the natural gas generator. So that's one metric. Another one would be lifetime backup hours. So looking at the lifetime of the equipment and the assumed number of outage hours it would have to cover, how many of those would it be able to cover? Followed by percentage backup, because that's just, what is the percentage of outage hours that this source would be able to back up for us? Current technology, lithium-ion batteries, it's not looking too good, but batteries are certainly accelerating in their tech, and they're going to become better, they're going to become bigger and cheaper, et cetera. But unfortunately, current technology, that's where it sits. So if that was the metric, then it'd be kind of tough to go in that direction. Moving down, let's look at more like greenhouse gas type metrics, dollars per GHG. So we calculated the estimated CO2 emissions for each of the different sources. And then we looked at, okay, well, so the diesel generator's the worst case scenario, right? That's the maximum CO2 output. Batteries is, that's going to be our best. That's a 0. So to calculate the dollars per DGHG, delta GHG, it's the difference between the diesel generator and the technology being looked at, the worst case and what we're looking at. So batteries right now are coming in actually pretty good at $1 per GHG cost if we look at the 10-year life cycle. However, if we look at a 30-year life cycle, we have to multiply that lifetime cost by 3. So the cost goes up, and the annual GHG stays the same, so our dollars per GHG goes down, and it makes the natural gas generator actually a lot closer. And one thing to point out is that a lot of the larger natural gas players are looking at mixing hydrogen in with the natural gas such that the final mix becomes a cleaner burning mix. And so when that happens, if we assume like a 50 to 70% mix of hydrogen and natural gas, then the dollars per GHG comparison between a gas generator and a current tech battery backup system becomes pretty equivalent. So this is just, again, these are really rough numbers, and a feasibility study or some sort would need to be done in order to really kind of get firmer numbers to do a real comparison between these technologies. But I hope that this thought experiment helps us at least see how different metrics would help us to rank one decision against another decision when it comes to how are we going to attack some of these goals that we've set for ourselves.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Keats. I was going to pass it back to the general manager to open this up to the board for discussion, and I was going to suggest we put this splash slide up because I think it kind of frames the discussion pretty succinctly. For one slide, and if you'd like anything else up, please let us know, but that is the end of our presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions and eager to hear from the board.
Thank you. I'm on now.
Where do we start? Brian's going to kick us off.
So this is, part one of a multi-part series of workshops so we can, as an organization, start to develop a more refined plan for green energy rate, green energy fund. The example here this evening that Mr. Keats and Mr. Poncelet presented would be a type of metrics that we would bring to the board on evaluating the needle we're moving in and what direction we're going to move in. The template here was used on decision for local reliability with either generator backup or battery storage. That same type of model could be applied to other clean local generations such as biomass or small hydro or a local community solar. A lot of different projects we could apply and present a model on. Staff this evening would like to open it to discussion for the board to give some direction on which type of resource resilience or reliability we want to pursue. Do we want to focus on the reliability or the local resiliency? Those are questions in terms of building a rate structure to fund projects. Really, we need to start with the direction we're going to go as an organization or as an agency so we can start to craft that for the board's consideration and review. And so I don't want to talk too much here. I want to open it up to discussion and feedback from the board and really from this point start to shape what the next workshop looks like and start to develop at least the foundation of a local resiliency rate, a green rate, a, reliability rate, or some larger funding mechanism. And this isn't, this isn't the exclusive process here. We heard earlier from CMUA, you've heard Mr. Poncelet and Mr. Horvath talk about grant opportunities and other local infrastructure bills. And so this is just one piece of this pie. It's not the only piece we're pursuing, but the topic here is how do we start to structure a rate that can get us moving in the right direction? I think first we need to know what direction we're going, and then we can develop the rate, or the fund, or the assessment, whatever that might be. So I'd like to, at this point, just to open up for discussion and question, and we'll provide feedback.
Thank you very much. I think that was a really good presentation. I think it was really accurate in giving us an understanding of the complexity of the situation and the time that we're in, right? There's a lot of moving pieces, and it's not an easy or a single solution is my, something that I think we can't stress enough. We can't put this all on Joe's plate saying, you need to green up our energy, portfolio mix. It's just not possible to solve this that way. So thank you for setting the table. We're at a diminished capacity with the board tonight. We only have 3 out of 5 board members, so that puts a lot of weight onto the shoulders of Director Bender, Director Aguirre, and myself.
Well, as Brian said, it's the start of a process, multi-step process. And I want to just say thank you again for putting this together, because it just puts, we were just so scattered. And and the reason is, well, look at this presentation. We've got multiple pieces of this puzzle, and we need to define what needle we're moving. So thank you.
Exactly.
Kicking it off.
And I'm going to just jump into the resilience versus reliability question. I see resilience as more of a community endeavor. Like, we should have lots of partners in that. The town of Truckee, the fire district, everybody. Every district has a stake in improving the resilience of this community. I think reliability falls more squarely into our laps. That we may get help from, the state and the California budget system. We may get, grants and stuff, but I feel like reliability, as far as delivering electricity and water to people's homes, that is our mission. So I am more inclined to point us first towards solutions that improve the reliability of our electrical system, which also improves the reliability of our water system. Our water system is dependent on our electrical system, correct? So to me, those projects would have a higher priority. And what do they look like? I think that.
Well, we already have one, right? We have backup diesel generators at all of our, all the critical water wells to keep the water flowing regardless of the weather conditions.
That's exactly right. We got that. And the good thing is that those are backups, and that the more reliable our system is, we don't need to use those, which is what we really want to avoid. We want to avoid turning on a diesel generator. That's like, when that solution was proposed for microgrids, I found that kind of appalling. I'm like, no, that's the solution to the climate emergency is not creating more emergency.
Well, we could do 100% backup, though. I'm not.
I would love to. And I do see that as like the big picture, what the PUD can do to help this community move its greenhouse gas emissions needles it's a multi-pronged thing. To walk the talk, first we need to look at our systems and how can we decarbonize our own processes, first thing. how do we do that with our water? I know you've been working on it. You've been bringing that up consistently over time, that is something that is on our plate and that we are taking steps to do. And obviously, our fleet is part of that. We understand that our large equipment, it's going to be hard to move that. We're waiting for technology to save us. Technology's not there yet, right? So we work on our small vehicles. We start, what we can do is where we start. First we get our systems as decarbonized as we can. Joe knows what his marching orders are as far as decarbonizing our power supply. He's been extremely effective, and I have absolute confidence that as time goes by, we will meet or exceed our community and our state's goals, because we have today. And I get it, the last 20%, you're right, the last 15%, whatever that is, there's going to be jumps at technology that is going to help us get that. And I don't expect Joe to be able to do that until that catches, its traction. But then getting to the community, that's the next big part, helping them navigate through the electrification process. And I see us having a very big role to play there. So I think those are projects and funding that are the next really obvious thing that we can do right now. Right now, that's within our power. It's within our budget, and it's within the technological capacity of the state of utilities right now. I'm gonna pause because I can keep talking, but I want to let other people respond. That includes staff and board members. Any reeling Director Finn in or saying?
Well, I just thought the battery storage thing was, everyone's been talking about it and stuff, and this just like puts the rubber where the road is, and there is no rubber. It's like 2% and it's megabucks, and it's like, that just doesn't do anything for me. It's like, okay, then let's talk about PV with battery, and it's like megabucks and not much reliability from that. So it's like, okay, disappointing, but it's nice to see the reality of it.
It doesn't pencil
Right,
yet,
it doesn't
right now.
pencil. Maybe great for the local folks to buy their own battery and PV setups and have that for themselves for what they want to do, but not on a utility size scale.
Is it reasonable for us to expect to have local generation to power our entire town? I think that's unreasonable. I don't think that's something that we should, I'm not entertaining that. I don't think that that's possible.
Yeah. But 2%'s pretty low,
2%
right?
is pretty low.
With a lot of money.
Yeah.
So.
No, since definitely, I think the subject of microgrids, what is that? What do they provide us as far as reliability and resilience goes? What role does something like that play? Do we pick out a few, okay, if power's going to go out because Nevada Energy does a PSOM, and we're going to be without power for a week. So, and this would be, I would hope that the community partners, the town, would help us identify what should be powered, what should that investment look like? Is that going to all fall onto us? Are we going to be responsible for creating microgrids to keep, the hospital or the rec center?
Well, they have, of course, the hospital has their own gas-fired generator.
Sort of.
You would hope.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that staff does continue to work with those agencies, the town of Truckee, Park and Rec, the hospital, on evaluating some of those acute backup energy sources. They tend to be, at this point, the diesel generator backups, those are the most kind of accessible and cost-efficient options. For for the purposes of this workshop, I think it's important. I heard President Finn and Vice President Bender speaking on, focusing that needle, at least in some part, on local reliability or reliability of our system. That's great direction. In terms of local generation, do we want to present back to the board options with that? Or are we looking more in, the resiliency of our system or the reliability of our system in terms of infrastructure and things of that nature? So we're talking green energy, local resiliency and reliability. Doesn't mean we have to exclude any of them, but we want to make sure that with the next workshop, we're presenting continued development and progress towards the needle the direction we're going.
So I wrote I really like, well, Krista, you've always mentioned the biomass, and then, so if you had like some kind of a combination natural gas biomass plant, I'm sure, you run natural gas to a biomass plant to get things fired up and rolling, and having a combination of that would be, well, as a mechanical guy, it seems pretty cool. So, and then we could have that, and then locally, they talk about out at Cabin Creek Road, but then maybe out at the airport, so it's a lot closer.
Or both. I mean,
Yeah.
biomass, what I feel like that addresses is that's the resource that we have. That is the local resource. It's more dependable than the sun. It's more dependable than the wind. It's here. We're surrounded by it. Our community is in danger from it. So we're working very hard to thin the forests and to get rid of this biomass, and then we have to pay to have it taken away. So it seems like that somehow should pencil, which does not mean that I think the PUD should own, build, or operate, or develop a biomass plant. But I do think if a developer is looking at citing that here, and I know there's a lot of interest in it from a lot of different, directions, from the town of Truckee to the airport to the fire district, to people, like North Star, who's doing a preliminary biomass plant. If they are making one that is the dual use where it can generate electricity, that's another thing. Biomass plants don't necessarily generate electricity; they generate heat. But if we can get to a point where we have one that will generate an amount of energy, we can buy it. Like we can sign a power purchase agreement, right? Like we do with many of our other resources. And I imagine that will just be one stream of income for that biomass plant that can help it be functional, that will help it pencil out financially, right? We'll buy the extra electricity. Somebody else is going to buy the heat. Somebody else is going to buy the biochar or use the wood products for whatever, in this community that would be an economic driver, artists, for example. Sierra Business Council is a resource here that they are really familiar with what a biomass can and can't produce. And if there's going to be mandates now coming down about transporting fuel, I mean, we don't have to transport the fuel. It's right here. If they're going to make people buy biomass, we're going to need biomass plants to process it. And it seems like it just makes sense that you would place the plant where the resource is. So I feel like there might be funding opportunities there. It's just as complicated. That one biomass is as complicated as all the other puzzles that we're looking at, right? It's a little mini puzzle of the same thing. So, that is the sort of role. We need baseload power. We want to increase the reliability of our electrical system. We want to increase the resiliency of our community, and this can address wildfire. So I think projects like that are the ones that I am very interested in exploring. I also would say geothermal. We know that this is a resource that we have here in the Sierra, in the foothills of the Sierra. I mean, we all go up to soak in the hot springs. That's, we know it's there. And if we're going to talk about big projects, that we can source kind of close by that aren't dependent on Nevada Energy's transmission, but, gosh, that's hard.
Yeah, the geothermal, it's South Reno, that's the closest one.
That's the closest one, yeah, exactly. I
You're
just
then
don't,
shipping it over on the same transmission lines.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not,
Yeah, biomass still just has that,
it checks a lot of boxes.
yeah.
And I think any route we take has to check a lot of boxes. It can't be just one, like this is super cheap, or it can't be just one, like this is gonna reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, or this is gonna make our economy more resilient, or our community more resilient. It's gonna have to check multiple boxes. So that will narrow our focus. How well just simply does it work? Again, a solar farm here, is that what we call it, solar, a community solar project, it's not a
Yeah,
farm.
mine's buried in snow right now still, so.
Yeah, they get,
Because I didn't tilt them up, then the HOA gets mad, but I did tilt up my solar hot water panels, so, so those, I have free hot water
great.
right now, but no electric, still buying
No
power.
electricity. And that's another subject, distributed resources, like individual homes with solar panels and batteries. I think that's something that we can facilitate that ultimately can be used as a virtual power plant, right? We've got our AMI metering in, we do, if we can get people to sign on and say, hey.
Yeah, that's kind of the, I'm having a brain cramp.
That's understandable.
The electrification incentives, that we're already doing it for heat pumps and
Right,
et cetera.
exactly.
So that could be expanded as part of the electrification.
Yeah, I think
side.
electrification has a lot of benefits. If we can get people and ourselves over the reliability thing. We don't actually have. We have a very reliable system. Let's just cut to the chase here. We have a very reliable system. There's a lot of anxiety about power going out. There are people right now who live in Truckee that only have electric. The senior center comes to mind. And they seem to survive every year, over and over again. They're still with us. We haven't managed to get rid of the old people. We're not, I'm joking. I'm not, I'm not suggesting anything of that sort, but I'm saying that I think there's a lot of fear around power outages that is not really reality-based. We
We could
do have-
underground everything and build our own natural gas / biomass power plant.
Yeah, and we'll be golden. And if we can shake that money tree, that's what we should do. But in the meantime, I think small
Mike over there,
bites.
he's got the money. So,
That's right. He's been diverting it into little streams. But, I think that those are the areas that I would explore. I would focus on reliability, and I would focus on local generation is what might make our system a little more reliable.
are we going in a different direction than you were expecting, Brian?
No, I love the candid conversation, and
I'm sitting here and I'm listening to everybody, and I don't know what direction we're going.
We're not quite sure yet.
Because you read your little puzzles here, and we have a lot of directions. And with this information that we have tonight, it's a very good start. What we're trying to do is not concern the design, but we want to see what we're going to do. And I think our master plan is a good start. And as far as energy, I think that for the bringing it all together, the last panel, I think gas would be 100, it says 100% here, same as the generator. And then the town is kind of doing away with the gas
On things that,
situation. So, I mean, I don't know if they're gonna get rid of all the gas, because the gas that's here now I think people are gonna keep that. They're not gonna eliminate that. I hear that it's for new building, but now where are they going with that? It's just for, so they're limiting the gas supply. Here a couple of years ago, we had a man come down from Northern California up here, Susanville and what have you. And he says that there's an ample amount of gas in Northern California out there. And he wanted us to kind of maybe build a plant and go into this business. And when we decided that, okay, maybe we ought to go into the gas, and we started that gas project as a PUD utility. And so we called Southwest Gas to do a little study for us. And what they came up with was, well, you guys aren't gonna do it, we're gonna do it. But
Coming back to
I
this.
understand there's ample gas in the state of California. Of course, it's getting it down here, but that'd be probably the main big expense. But then again, the way my gas bill has been last month and this month, everybody said the gas has gone up quite a bit just in the last couple of
It's
months.
gonna get expensive. It's gonna get more expensive.
Huh?
That resource is going to become more and more expensive. Just
I know
the
it.
economics are not
So,
there.
I think we're on the right track, and I think that our master plan that we're working on too is right behind this. And we can just elaborate on both projects and go from there. Because we are working on this stuff now.
Yeah, so to summarize, what I'm hearing from the board this evening is there's definitely an emphasis on our system reliability. We'll continue to carry that momentum forward, continue to build robust and hardened infrastructure. We'll also look at local emergency backup opportunities. What I'm also hearing is there's, for the next presentations, we already have on the schedule, Mr. Horvath will present to the board an update on the current status of our energy purchase portfolio, what those percentages of renewables are, what the opportunities are for 2022 and beyond. I believe he has some pretty exciting news on opportunities for expansion of existing resources and then new resources that we may want to pursue. Things like geothermal, additional wind, additional solar. And so we'll have some great discussions on that. That will be checking the box in terms of our larger renewable portfolio growth. In terms of local resiliency, what I'm hearing is the district come back, or the staff come back to the board with opportunities for the district to support and further local resiliency, things like potentially distributed generation or on-site storage for our community. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the district's, project, but we're, as an agency, supporting that in community resiliency. And then look for opportunities for, as I said, reliability at our substation level and grid level.
I think that's a fair summation. And I'm only speaking for myself, not as, my needle is greenhouse gas reductions. I understand that can't occur at the wholesale expense of rates and reliability. But I think we do have a very reliable system. I think there's an education component that we need to just help people work through their fear. They don't have to be afraid. We're not going to leave people to freeze to death. That's not what we're working on doing with our electrification pushes. And I do think we should be encouraging people to depend more on electricity than on their natural gas. And that's a real kind of small but significant thing. And, you know, in an emergency, use your gas, but otherwise, use your electric heater, right? We're not going to make people not cook on their gas stoves. We love our gas stoves, but we can encourage them to get an electric hot water heater. You know, these are kind of painless but significant changes that people can make. And that reduces our greenhouse gas emissions in this community.
A heat pump electric
A
water.
heat pump, oh my gosh,
Because
you
the
know.
California Energy Code's not gonna like standard electric resistance heating.
Okay.
Or water heating.
Gas is high,
Whatever we have to do,
and so is electricity.
That's for the new code.
as
sorry.
electricity is high, but you know
Now,
what?
This tract behind us right here, this whole mountainside, this PUD was gonna make that track, the development, all electric. It was gonna be an all-electric track, this whole area here, right behind us, when they started building these homes. And it didn't work out somehow, and that's,
Yeah, well,
the electricity was pretty reasonable. Now, they're trying to eliminate the gas or downgrade it or so on. And man, when we were out of power here for 4 or 5 days, all we had was the gas backup.
no, that's legit, and that, you know,
If you had gas in your house. Now, I do, I have, but I didn't get my stove going. But I could have if I knew how to do it. And I know how now, but I think that gas is the second thing coming up. Because when the power goes out, you know what happens.
yeah, when the power goes out, of course,
It's
we use our gas,
another
of course.
world.
Yeah. But we can do it, and we have done it. And, you know, as we continue to make our buildings more efficient and holding their heat, and there are solutions to these problems. There are northern environments that are tackling these head-on, you know, Northern Europe, Ithaca. I just attended a meeting with Block Power and the gentleman who's in charge of decarbonizing the buildings, all of the buildings in Ithaca. So this is a new initiative that it's extremely aggressive, and there's a lot of creative financing. My big takeaway was creative financing. Mike, come up with, you know, how do we do it? How do we pay for it? It can be done.
Another thing, on the biomass. Okay, I don't know if a big scale plant of biomass might do the trick, like maybe
might.
bigger than the one Littleton had over there. But we tried that here too, and it wouldn't even pay for itself. But it was on a small scale. So, I mean,
Yeah, it was like a
How do we-
garage size.
Pardon?
It was a garage size over at
yeah,
the,
at the recreation park.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. And it was,
And they just.
They built
said,
it?
"Well, we're not
Or they
gonna
just-
operate it anymore.
I just know that it was there.
okay.
And Scotty Terrell
Oh,
was pushing that.
see, it's, all of us geeks are totally,
Scott Terrell,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, when he was here, so,
Yeah.
but technology keeps changing.
right.
And the situation keeps changing, the legislative landscape keeps changing, you know, there's a biomass mandate, and then there's not a biomass mandate, there, you know, so I think we should ignore the noise around it, and if the solution works for our community, and there's a coalition that's interested in making it happen, then yay, you know, that's what we should foster, is the relationships and the, you know, what will work for where we are.
Well, you know what
Yeah.
Jeff said was, I think is pretty reasonable, gas and biomass. At least we have the two entities coming in, and we have two. We don't just have one to rely on.
Yeah.
And,
I think that with both of them, it might work, and then we could, what we're looking into, or what we should do, is find out, in a bigger scale, would it pay for itself?
And I think we've got biomass people here in town who can, you know, help us answer those questions, like who are interested in developing a biomass plant here in Truckee. again, that shouldn't be
What
us.
scale do we have to go, though?
I don't think we're not gonna be able to power our whole town with a biomass plant here. I have a feeling that is just a really big ask.
Well, it starts to fill the bucket of our strategic goal of the local clean power generation. So,
Exactly.
That's-
Distributed resources, maybe a little biomass plant or a series of little biomass plants. I mean, they used to exist all up and down the Sierra. It was a thing.
Yeah, I think the biomass discussion falls into that category where we know there are a couple regional agencies that are exploring those options, and the district has been supportive at the kind of introductory level of some of those projects, and we can continue to bring back updates to the board as those options get explored locally. You are correct that, biomass has some scalability issues when it comes to electric generation. But in terms of GHG reduction and environmental stewardship, I think they are absolutely viable options, and the district will continue to work and support with local interest in that arena. And so I think the staff has some direction here. Yeah, we have some direction here for the next workshops. Again, there'll be a focus in the near future on presentations with our renewable portfolio, and then staff will work on creating some more information and comparative metrics on some options with both reliability and our role in local resiliency.
This is a good report, a great report.
It is.
I give the credit to Mr. Poncelli and Mr. Keats. They did some work on that.
I'll tell you, they did, and it's a good report.
Thank you.
Exactly. Green rates and beyond, exactly.
It was good.
Yeah, had a lot of information has come our way tonight, so I do really appreciate staff and CMUA and everybody, because this is what it's gonna take. It's gonna take all of us.
I was even looking at the picture on the front. I said, gee, that's a beautiful town down there. Where is that? There's the Capitol building and the railroad track and the White House. Oh, my
Hey,
God.
you could live there,
We
Joe.
can there, it looks nice.
I'm not even planning on moving.
Okay, well, thank you for that workshop item, everybody. I really appreciate your help. That's more.
This'll help a lot in that master
Yeah.
plan, for sure.
And okay, so now I'm looking back at my, where I'm at here. We are at closed session. We have provided feedback, you're good, excellent. So we are going to enter into closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6. Conference with labor negotiators. Brian Wright, General Manager for the unrepresented, is going to give us some more information. And I think I would like to take just a quick 5-minute break. Is that work? Okay, and then I think we're kicking everybody out of here, and we're going to have closed session in here.
That's what I wanted to ask you. Is it the board's desire to have the closed session in here?
Spread out? Or do we want to go in the room?
Or with the reduced attendance, are you comfortable with the closed session room, or would you like us to vacate this room? It's either one.
We've never had, we're like, it's weird. Who else planning on staying for the rest of the night? Like, am I making people sit on the stairs or something?
We can have staff and the public wait in the lobby area, those that want to return, and we can hold closed session here. We just have to ensure that our audio and visual technologies are turned off, that this is a... Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
And we don't have anything else. I think closed session's closed, so we're just going to report out nothing, probably. So-
Hey, Brian, I met Scott earlier tonight. Maybe we'll introduce him.